Welcome to our session entitled Core Word Literacy in an Academic Unit of Study. My name is Mary Beth Fleming, and I am an assistive technology coach with Assistive Technology Services in Fairfax County Public Schools. I've been in the department a couple decades now. My initial background was learning disabilities, but through my years teaching AT, I have grown to love AAC and everything to do with it. And my partner in crime today is...
Hi, I'm Christina Winkler. I'm also an assistive technology coach with Assistive Technology Services. I'm a little bit newer to our department, and I come from the classroom. I was a severe disabilities teacher for 5 years, and then I spent a year in Cat A, but I have a lot of background teaching students with diverse communication needs. And so in our presentation today, we go through some of the things that I used in the classroom that was supported by Assistive Technology Services. All right, so today during our session, we hope that you will take away two main key learnings, that you'll be able to explore some assistive technology tools that can be used to support access to the curriculum, and explore some implementation strategies for your AAC users. Below, you'll see 3 different language systems, and we'll cover how we can support students with a variety of language systems. All right, so let's imagine you're sitting down to plan an academic unit of study for your Cat B classroom. Your students are participating in the VSOL assessment, so you're using those standards to plan. The Adapted Curriculum Office has created this pacing guide for elementary, middle, and high school classrooms with the VSOL standards. Using this pacing guide, you know that your first science unit is going to be on plants and animal survival. If you click on that link, it will bring you up to this to these more specific standards. And so you know that you're going to be talking about parts of a plant and what plants need to survive. But we want to create a unit that is accessible for our AAC users. So during the session today, we will explore what tools are available and what can we use to create or adapt a unit that is accessible for our AAC users.
So during our presentation or in our slides today, up in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to notice a variety of different technologies. Some of them are considered AT, some of them really aren't considered AT, but definitely useful when you're creating your instruction. All right, so as you can tell that there's Giphy, Google, lesson picks, we'll have like the little symbols up in the upper right hand corner. Chat editor, a new voice. We're going to explore slides, PowerPoint, Word, and a snipping tool.
All right. So let's get back to our unit plan and making a vocabulary list. Within the unit on plant and animal survival, we need to discuss the parts of the plant. And specifically for this lesson, we're going to be thinking about the root. So what vocabulary might be needed for a lesson on roots? Obviously, we're going to need to talk about the word root, but we also might want to talk about grow. The plant is growing. Or we might need to talk about where it's growing. It's growing up and it's growing down. We might need to talk about size. The plant starts small and it gets bigger. So we can use New Voice to use using the Write with Icons tool to create a vocabulary list for our AAC users. And now Mary Beth is going to talk you through how you would use New Voice to make a vocabulary list like this.
Okay, so first thing, you're going to open up your computer and you're going to search for New Voice in the lower left-hand corner. So I'm just going to type in New Voice, and I see the app right there. I'm going to click on it. And as New Voice opens, you're going to see an emulator that pops up, but we have to get to something called Write with Icons. So we're going to go up to Vocabulary and then Vocabulary Display Options and scoot right on down to Write with Icons. You can adjust the size if you want a smaller icon. You can use the lower arrow, or I made it a little bit bigger. I'm going to enter and then kind of space over just to give myself a little space. And then I'm just going to start typing. And if the word is in your user, it's going to pop up just like you're using a typewriter or Word or a word processor. And the sequences that the kids are going to press to be able to say that word are showing. I'm going to make it look a little bit more pretty. I created a phrase that I'm going to use later on in the presentation right there. And now I'm going to create my list here. Water up and water down. Now, how I'm going to grab this and bring it into a document that is useful for me with my students, I am going to grab my snipping tool. And I'm going to say new. I'm going to select what I would like to bring over. So I'm going to grab my sentence here. And I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to open up something. It doesn't matter what you put it in. You want to put it in Word, that's great. PowerPoint, Google Slides, Google Doc, whatever you want. I'm just going to open up PowerPoint. And I'm right-clicking and pasting, or you can go up to paste it any which way you want.
Awesome. So that's a really simple way to pull those icon sequences and then use them in your lessons. So if you take the vocabulary words that we brainstormed before, like root and grow, you can snip them just like Mary Beth just did, and then make these vocabulary cards. I love to use these when I was in the classroom because they were really helpful to have the students review vocabulary before we started a lesson, or to give them options to answer the question. And you can see here, I just made two different versions of the vocabulary card, depending on my students' needs. One just has the icon sequence and the written word, and then another one has the visual support along with the icon sequence. All right. Now, what if your student doesn't use a system that New Voice supports? Another common language we use a lot is something called Touch Chat, and you can use a program called Chat Editor, which Mary Beth will show in a minute, very similar to New Voice, to create those icon sequences. So let's take a look at the page in Touch Chat where they're talking about some nature words. So you can see we have words like leaf and tree and flower. So that might be where you expect our vocabulary for our lesson on roots to be. However, if you search in Chat Editor, the word root does not appear. So what do we do if our system doesn't have the right vocabulary? And Mary Beth gave you a little preview in that video before if you're paying close attention. She mentioned something like water in or water up. So we can describe the word. So we can describe how it looks or its function. So she was writing water in, the roots bring water into the plant. What are some other ways we could describe it? We could even think about things like the plant water road. It is the road that the water travels on for the plant, or that it's under plant. We can talk about its location. So using those descriptive tools, we can still create vocabulary cards for words like root. Now Mary Beth is going to show you a quick demonstration on how we can use Chat Editor to create those icon sequences.
All right, sorry about that. I'm searching for Chat Editor and it's opening up. And this is a little bit different than New Voice. So I actually have to know the sequence myself. I'm going to click on Capture, and I'm moving the window down a little bit. And I need to go hunt for the word I want. And I'm going to choose water in. So I'm going to go up to groups, then drink, and click on water. I have to go back home to get that word in. And then I'm just going to go down to the window again and say copy to clipboard. And I'm going to find the application I would like to paste it in. This time I'm doing PowerPoint again. I'm just going to right click and press paste. You can add a picture in there from Google if you want, or you can print it out just like that as cards. One thing that I did want to note and say, the past software, the new voice software, seems a lot easier to use because all you do is just type in the word, and if it's in the system, it pops in. With the chat editor, you have to know the system pretty well, and you have to know the sequences. So there might be a little bit more prior planning. Also, that was a 60 user. You can switch the user to if the student is using more cells or less cells in chat editor as well.
All right, so let's take our vocabulary one step further. Instead of using icon sequences, say you just want to have the picture and the word, maybe for students who are not AAC users and just need those visuals. So right here, I used lesson pics and I used their word and picture template. I added all these pictures in, and then I was able to change the word to match the vocabulary that I wanted to use for this lesson. And this is a great quick resource to make. You can cut it out and laminate it, and then you have answer choice cards, vocabulary review cards. You can use them for comprehension questions, just a ton of different options with an activity that took me less than a minute to make. Okay, let's explore some other options that are available for us when we're planning this unit. One really great program is something called Myon. And Myon has a wide range of fiction and nonfiction books about a variety of topics. So when I was on Myon, I searched for roots, and I found this really great book. The sentences are pretty simple. There's lots of real life pictures. And the great thing about Myon is you do have the option to have it read aloud to you if you would like. So as I was reading this story with my students, I wanted to assess their comprehension. And the way I did that was I created comprehension questions in Google Slides. This comprehension question is, where do roots keep the plants? And then I used lesson pics and New Voice to create my materials. So up here at the top, you'll see my pictures are from lesson pics. I used a picture of a sky and a picture of the ground. And so that's a really great option for your students who need a receptive answer choice where they can point to or circle or use a bingo marker to indicate their response, or really great for your students who just need a little bit of a visual cue to get their expressive response out. I also use the New Voice icon sequences for students who are AAC users and might need a little bit of extra help with their expressive language. So by giving them the icon sequences for both options, they don't need to remember that specific vocabulary. They just need to think about their answer choice and then follow the icon sequence that matches their answer choice. And as you can see here, I created a bunch of comprehension questions. Sometimes I would use them as assessment at the end of the book. Sometimes I would use them as assessment as we were reading, or even at the end of the unit. So there's a wide range of possibilities just using those two tools, lesson pics and New Voice. Of course, you could also use Chat Editor, and we will explore some comprehension with Chat Editor a little bit later in the presentation, but for the purposes of this one, I had just done New Voice for LAMP. All right, another way we can work on our students' comprehension is through the concept development, showing them a picture of our vocabulary word and asking, is this the vocabulary word? So here we're talking about roots. I found this picture and I wanted to ask them, does this show roots? I gave them again two answer choices, root and not root. Here again, I use the New Voice icon sequences so students can either point to the answer that they would like, or they can use their AAC device to respond expressively. If you don't want your students focusing on the specific lesson vocabulary as much and you want to embed some more core words, instead of asking them root or not root, you could say, does this show root? It does, or it's not. And so that kind of embeds that core words a little bit more. Those are words that you would use across multiple lessons, and they're still able to show their knowledge of the academic content. Another way you can have them practice answering is with yes and no. Again, this is a little bit more core friendly because we use yes and no all the time. And for many of our students, they do need some explicit practice in how you answer yes and no questions. So you show them the picture, and then they have the option to either point to or use their AAC device to say yes or no. The last kind of concept development extension I made was a sorting activity. And I used the lesson pick sorting mat, and it was very easy. I just pulled in a picture for each part of the plant, and then lesson picks generated this sorting mat for me. There's a lot of ways you can use this. I made a second activity in lesson picks, which is just some visual choices in the picture cards lesson picks tool. I added those pictures to my tray, created the picture cards without the words, and then students can cut them up and sort them. This is a great way to embed some fine motor skills of cutting and gluing into your academic lesson. And again, this can be done as a whole group activity, or it could be done as an individual student assessment. All right, and now Mary Beth is going to talk to us a little bit about another resource available.
Oh, this is one of my favorites. So Christina just talked about Mayan. That one, you actually have to get a login through your school. Pebble Go, however, is free for Fairfax. The login is FCPS and the password is FCPS. So they have great resources. This one, obviously, we're on the root train right now. So I'm going to be showing you a book about roots, but they have biographies, nonfiction, a great place to go to have your kids be able to answer some comprehension questions, be able to sequence if their IEP goals are about sequencing. This is really great too. This is an example of the root, a root book. And as you can tell up at the top, there's tabs. So there's roots, water for plants, kinds of roots, getting water, roots we eat. Each one has 3 or 4 sentences, and it does have the ability to talk. It has that auditory feedback. And what's wonderful about it is it also tracks too. So a highlighter will go through as she is talking. In addition, down at the bottom of the page, if you clicked on cite, it would give you the exact site if you needed that for a research paper. The article, you can actually have it page by page and print it out, or the whole entire article with the picture, so which is nice if you needed the print form of it. And there's also activities that they have in there, printed activities that they have in there. There's also a video that's associated with it. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for our kids who need this adapted curriculum. So this is just an example of one of the pages that you can print out from before. And here is a comprehension question that I created with Google icons, and these are our chat editor choices. So as you can tell, I used 2 nouns. I used water as one choice to answer the question of what plants need to live and grow, and Play-Doh was my other choice. So we're using the nouns for this one. Water moves this way to the stem and leaves. So again, this is core vocabulary. Does it go down or does it go up? I brought in some pictures from Google, and there are my chat editor sequences down at the bottom for our students. Now, if your students aren't using chat editor, or they're not using New Voice, or the language systems within New Voice, you can print out the pictures and place them on your Big Mac and have them choose up, down, or Christina's activity earlier, yes and no. So here's a second page in that route from Pebble Go. So we'd read the page aloud, and then I created some comprehension questions. And as we said before, sometimes these vocabulary words are not in our students' language app. Like they might not be in Lamp Words for Life or in the chat editor app. So we need to think of different vocabulary in order for our students to prove that they've comprehended what they just read. So with this, I showed a watermelon, and they can answer this, or carrots, and they can answer that. So which one is a root? So instead of having them answer watermelon or answer carrots, they can answer this or that. And the same thing, there's a beet and limes. Instead of them learning where limes are, there might not be limes on your language system, and there might not be beet on your language system. So this is a nice way to get around it and still have your student using their AAC. I actually created this in Google Slides, and it's another sorting activity. Christina showed one earlier from Lesson Picks, which is wonderful because it created it for you, and it's a printout activity. I wanted to create a sorting activity, but I actually wanted it to be a little bit more interactive. Bring it up on the smartboard or use it on the student's touchscreen laptop or touchscreen monitor if they have that accommodation. So I created two huge rectangles here, and the students have to tell me if it's a root or not a root. So they're going to grab if it's a root and drop it over into my section that's a root. And if it's not a root, they're going to touch and drag it and bring it over to not a root. If you are creating this activity on your own, just a little tip, when you create your rectangle, just right click on it and you are going to have the option of sending it to the back of your screen. If it's not at the back of the screen, then when you drag over your banana or your clementines or your umbrella, those items might get hidden behind the rectangle. So you're going to right click on it, you're going to choose order, and then you're going to choose send back. So that's just a little tech tip. This is me again. Wonderful. Okay. So I love there's a lot of rich literature right down the hallway in our school library or a public library or even your home library. And so I created a book from a picture book called My Garden. And it's a ton of fun book to read, but there are vocabulary words in there that do not coincide with the vocabulary that's in our children's language system. But our students can still read the story and enjoy the story and the wonderful illustrations, but we just need to adapt the vocabulary for it. So for instance, this little girl, she planted some jelly beans in her garden and she made a jelly bean bush. So if you cannot read that, like I can't because I'm getting older in years, it says, if I planted jelly beans, I'd grow a big jelly bean bush. Well, not all those vocabulary words, again, are in the AAC system. So I adapted it, and it's the same exact picture that I brought over into PowerPoint or Google Slides, wherever I brought it, and I just wrote, I plant and grow candy. And one of the things I think is fun for our students to be able to express themselves is over here to the left. I like putting comments in that the students have. So yum or delicious or great or good, just to add a little spice so that they can comment on what they're reading.
All right, so let's keep going with this literacy extension theme. So like Mary Beth mentioned, she adapted this book, My Garden. It is a really fun book for students to read. And another way that we can think about adapting books is think about them with either repeated lines or think about them with core words. So after I read this book, I noticed that the theme kind of the book was that she wanted all of these things in her garden that her mom didn't plant. Like her mom didn't plant jelly beans, but she wanted jelly beans in the garden. So I use Lesson Picks. They have a template option where you can make covers for Big Macs, which I love. And so I pulled a picture. This is actually from the Unity and LAMP system. So it's the same icon that our AAC users who use LAMP would see. So I like to add that in our Big Macs just so there's some consistency across the classroom. And then you can put that right on the Big Mac and record want. And as you're reading, students can activate want and participate in the lesson. If you'd rather use a repeated line, she talks a lot about what she would want in her garden. So I made a different Big Mac cover that just says in my garden, and it has a nice picture of a garden. Again, you'd cut that out and put it right on your Big Mac, and then you can record in my garden. So let's look at a page from the book and explore how we could use that Big Mac as we are reading. So this page says the tomatoes would be as big as beach balls and the carrots would be invisible because I don't like carrots. Now, as you can see, we don't have the words in my garden or want on this page, but we can definitely still use those Big Mac covers to get our students to participate. The first one we're going to look at is in my garden. You'll see I put it up at the top and on the left because I want the students to say that before I read. So I might turn to this page and then present my students the Big Mac, and they activate it and it says in my garden, and then I keep reading. So it would sound like in my garden, the tomatoes would be as big as beach balls and the carrots would be invisible because I don't like carrots. That still definitely goes in line with what the text is saying. And now your students have been able to participate with a repeated line, which is really fun. You can also use the word want. So we're going to have to edit the vocabulary and the sentence a little bit to get the same message across, very similar to how Mary Beth adapted the book in the last few slides. So we might present the Big Mac to the student and they say want. And then we would say the tomatoes to be as big as beach balls and the carrots to be invisible because I don't like carrots. Still means the same thing. And then the student was able to participate in the reading of that story and practice the core word and saying that they want the tomatoes and they don't want the carrots. You could even take it one step further and have one Big Mac that says want and one Big Mac that says don't want or not want. All right. Another way that we can use a tool to support our students' understanding of literacy is to make more comprehension questions. So we were talking about using lesson picks and Google Images to make comprehension questions for some of our nonfiction activities, but we can also use Boardmaker. So Boardmaker can either be made to print it out or to be made interactive. These ones I just printed out, but there are interactive multiple choice options in Boardmaker, which you could use again right on the smartboard or on your student's touchscreen device if they have that. So here you can see I just made 2 questions. Who does she help and what does she do to help? I found some visuals that went along with my answer choices and I placed them on the card, and then students can point to, circle, or touch or say their answer. And we didn't do this on these comprehension questions, but you could have also again used New Voice or Chat Editor to put those icon sequences underneath so students could participate. And moving on from reading, we can continue our literacy extension into writing. So here I use lesson picks to create a writing template. Over on the left, you'll see there's a space for the students to draw or put in pictures. There is a handwriting line, and then there is a prompt, and it says, in my garden, I want. So we wouldn't expect the students to write all that. Maybe they just have to write the one thing they would want in the garden. And so I thought about some of the things I liked from the story or some other things students might want to plant in their garden, like flowers or candy or butterflies. Some of those we would really plant, some of those we might not, but we like to give students some creative options. So I use lesson picks to create this visual choice board and to create this writing prompt. Then students can select what they would put in their garden. They can write it on this line. They could cut the picture out from the choice board and paste it in, or they could draw it. And that way they've participated in a writing activity that talks about something fun that they would want to plant in their garden. And of course, don't forget your vocabulary list. So I made a vocabulary list in Chat Editor and in New Voice for that visual choice board. So students can then talk about the fun things that they would want to plant in their garden. All right, so I think that's everything. Thank you so much for attending our session. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you found a resource to take back into your classroom for planning your next academic unit of study.